Hi, I'm Dean Bushmiller, and this is Threats and Vulnerabilities Overview. When we look at threats and vulnerabilities, we kind of need a way to differentiate those things. So in this case right here, what we have is an archer, and that archer is a threat agent. That's the person. And they have a threat, and you can see that the bow has got the arrow knocked in it, and it's going toward the vulnerability. The vulnerability is kind of the target. So the threat is the arrow and the vulnerability is the target, and our asset in theory would be behind that target. Now we could put a control in front of it, and that would be some sort of shield in that case. The threat agent is that who. In the case of threats and vulnerabilities, sometimes there is no intention or motivations, and that could be because it's accidental. And this happens with employees making a mistake, kicking the plug out of the server or of the rack or whatever it is by mistake. That happens. Most of the time, what we're really focused in on is negative intentions or motivations, and these are attackers or things like advanced persistent threats, which is long-term attacks against us. The threat is the how. That's the process, the tactic, or the technique. These are circumstances or events with a potential to adversely impact our operation. It's not that it's going to happen, but it could happen. And when we talk about threats, it kind of feels like they're threatening us. No, well, it's just the way that this thing could happen. We have an open port there, and we have a buffer overflow on that port. And if somebody were to figure out how to write to that buffer, that would be evil in its intention. But a lot of times we have buffer overflows that just happen on systems. Now, the vulnerability itself is the flaw. That's the specific instance. That's the target that the threat is going toward. It can be exploited or triggered by a threat. Can be, isn't at this moment in time. This is a potential opportunity. Then we have the controls, and that's the thing that protects us as we're going along. That's the tool that's in the attacker's way. That's that shield between the target and the archer at that point that would deflect that arrow in some way, shape, or form. We call that mitigation, and that could be a device or it could be a process. Now, why did I go over all of this stuff? Why did I do these basic definitions here? Well, there's a series of vulnerability and threat presentations that I'm offering to you, and it's this big, huge list here. Now, this one's free. Everybody gets to see this all the way through. Most of the time at this point, I would say, now go ahead and for the entire video, go to our website. But this one's the one that everybody gets to see, because all of these other potential videos that are out there require this basic information that we're going to cover in this section. So I want to get started with all the different components inside of here and break it down for us so that we have a really solid foundation, so that I don't end up repeating myself throughout all of these right here, and I can focus in on our main targets. So let's go over to risk management, which is a major component that we worry about with threats and vulnerabilities. Now, we're looking for, as senior leaders in the organizations, potential consequences to the extent with which an entity is threatened by a potential event. So, and the annualized loss expectancy. This is the overall process that we hear and go, okay, this is really bad. Now, that's a function of things like the likelihood of occurrence. What is the chances of this happening? That's the annualized rate of occurrence. What are the impacts if this event occurs? That's the single loss expectancy. So annualized, it happens 5 times in a year, and the loss is $1. So then our annualized loss expectancy, when we combine these two together, is $5 in that case, just arbitrarily. So management says, hey, look, we've got to realize that there are losses, and we're going to have to address those losses if they happen. Now, threats and vulnerabilities are all around us all the time. So how do we figure out what threats and vulnerabilities we have to deal with? On what assets? If we look at our assets, a lot of times we look at things that are the business value. And a lot of times people say, well, there's the server, and it's got all of our data on it. The server is the asset. No, it's not. It's the data on the server, not the server. Now, I make that distinction because when we're talking to management, we want to say, this is the asset that we're protecting. When I say to management, this server is the thing that we're protecting, they don't care about that. But if I said, this is the list of records of all of the customers and all of the purchases that they have from us and our best customers, they would go, wow, we really have to protect them. Yes, now that's sitting on an asset delivery protocol. Okay, now I use that term to be unique as compared to everything else that's out there. But the asset delivery protocol is the tool that delivers the assets, the business function of the organization. And so usually what I do is I say, okay, how is this business function being delivered? That could be by a person. I could say, hey, look, I'm doing something to transform this information, or I'm handing this information from one person to another, like in the mailroom. Mostly it's not that, but it could be. Most of the time it's some sort of client server operation or some sort of middleware, like an application programming interface. And today we have a lot of software as a service that are handing things off, not going straight from client to server, but from client to server to client to server to client to server, and it keeps on getting passed down through all these different processes there. Now, what you want to focus in on is the process or the protocol that's actually delivering that. And so that's our asset delivery protocol. That lets us know what we have to look for threats and vulnerabilities in.